Hello, honeys, and welcome back. In this edition of the Beesness, we are covering the buzz from January 26th through February 1st of 2025. Today's stories come from Hyperallergic, Art News, the Smithsonian Magazine, and more, so here we go. Today's first follow-up, the Notre Dame stained glass controversy has officially gone to court. The French publication Le Parisien reported that the French heritage organization, One Sites and Monuments, has been joined by at least one private donor to the cathedral's 5-year fire damage-focused restoration in taking legal action against the project, backed by French President Emmanuel Macron, to replace existing 19th century stained glass windows by Eugène Viollet-Deluc with contemporary ones by artist Claire Tabaret. I personally believe it's pretty notable that private donor is art historian Jean-David Jameau-Lafond. The Sites and Monuments Group filed an initial appeal in a Paris court on January 27th in formal attempt to block the removal of the existing windows, in part because they were undamaged by the 2019 fire. The same windows are also classified as historic monuments. The group argued in their appeal that the public administration has no, quote, legal competence, end quote, to do anything beyond, quote, conserving and restoring the cathedral, end quote. We have previously reported that a petition against the window replacement launched in 2023 has gained over 278,000 signatures to date. A second headline from France, the Louvre is set to give Mona Lisa her own room as of last week. President Macron announced on Monday, January 28th, that the Musée du Louvre is set to undergo a major renovation and expansion project that will devote an entire room to the Mona Lisa. He suggested the artwork will have a sizable basement-level chamber with its own separate entrance from the rest of the museum, and went on to describe that the Nouvelle Renaissance project would include new additional entrances, as well as efforts to connect existing large underground spaces, as well as other improvements. The timing of the announcement is significant. It's made almost a year after an external review of visitor experiences to the Louvre revealed that Da Vinci's famed piece had earned it the titles of both Most Disappointing Viewing Experience and the Most Underwhelming Masterpiece. The museum began floating the idea of a new space for her independent display altogether shortly after, but their final decision to make this a larger project is not terribly surprising because, as Smithsonian Magazine says, the palatial building's last largest renovations happened in the 1980s. Work is set to begin in 2025 itself, as the Louvre intends on accepting architectural proposals later this year for the expansion to hopefully be inaugurated by 2031, although it is too early for museum spokespeople to confirm many of the details. Our sources explained that this massive undertaking will be financed by the museum's sponsorship deal with the Louvre Abu Dhabi, as well as plans to increase admission prices for non-EU visitors starting next January instead of from the pockets of the French public. The French Ministry of Culture has already committed close to 10 million euros, or about 10.42 million US, to support work on the site before renovations really begin. We additionally heard last week that Sotheby's will accept cryptocurrency payments in an upcoming Saudi Arabia auction. The firm has confirmed to Artsy that it will accept cryptocurrency for its 2-day sale entitled Origins across the entirety of the sale through a so-called payment processor that supports several cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin and Ether, at next month's event. The headline caught our attention, honeys, because this will be the first ever international commercial auction to take place in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The sale will feature 119 lots by a number of Western and Arab artists, including René Magritte and Loïc Kayale. So it will be fascinating to see how different objects in different categories perform. We're also paying attention because this move comes at a time of renewed interest in cryptocurrencies within the art market. Sotheby's indicated an interest in tapping into new pools of buyers with this choice and said, quote, "There is a lot of activity in the digital art and crypto world, as well as an existing base of collectors. And so this payment form is well accepted in the region, end quote. We will likely see this interest in the intersections of cryptocurrency and arts markets bolstered further as blockchain-based currencies gain further mainstream and governmental recognitions. For an example of such recognitions, President Trump signed an executive order this week to create a cryptocurrency working group, which will be tasked with, quote, new digital asset regulations and exploring the creation of a national cryptocurrency stockpile, end quote, as was reported by Reuters. We also saw arts experts question a new report claiming that fall 2024 auctions were the worst financial performers this century. In said new report reviewing last year's fall auction season, veteran art market analyst Michael Moses, a retired professor at New York University's Stern School of Business, and Jianping Mei, a professor at Beijing's Cheokong Graduate School of Business, said it was, quote, the worst overall financial performance, end quote, for the art market this century. Moses and Mei, who co-operate JP Mei and MA Moses Art Market Consultancy, began sending out co-authored reports via email at the end of this past December, providing a sort of follow-up to a comparable one released last year by the duo, which also declared that the spring 2024 auction season was the worst in nearly 25 years, saying it was, quote, as financially bad as it gets, end quote. Yet several credible art market experts have contested that assessment, claiming that the report gives too narrow a view of the art market because of its flawed, quote, sample selection biases, end quote. One of the notables among them, Claire McAndrew, the economist behind the annual Art Basel and UBS Global Art Market Report, which is as close to an industry-wide economic data as the art market has, told Art News that she's very skeptical of Moses and May's findings. She points out that for the spring 2024 report, the duo limited analysis to about 50,000 repeat sales of artworks at Christie's, Sotheby's, and Phillips over the last 25 years, meaning that only works first purchased at any worldwide auction from 1970 onwards were included. May and Moses adopted the same methodology and analyzed around 56,000 repeat sales for this fall 2024 report, which reads in part, quote, for the first time this century, the mean of all the individual semi-annual returns was negative, in parentheses, negative 0.1%, end quote. McAndrews suggests only using repeat sales as well as only surveying results at the three major auction houses is sample selection bias. In other words, McAndrews' problem is that May and Moses have only considered artworks that are being sold for the first time and by very few sources. Their scope is incredibly limited in that way. They have not accounted for private sales or any number of other potential sources of change activity in the arts market. McAndrews is backed by many experts, including New York-based art advisor Adam Green, a fellow podcaster and presenter of the Art Tactic podcast, who told Art News that the art market's health is much more nuanced than the report claims. Thieves blasted open a Dutch museum entrance and stole gold pieces and then were arrested within the week. According to police reports, the heist occurred at the Drents Museum in Assen on Saturday, January 25th at 3:45 a.m. First responders quickly determined that some damage to the building was done, but there were no injuries reported. The museum still was closed until further notice. The objects stolen were 3 Dacian royal bracelets from 50 BCE, plus a golden headpiece from 450 BCE, known as the helmet of Cotofenesti. The 4 were among 500 plus total gold and silver objects displayed in the visiting archaeology exhibition Dacia, Empire of Gold and Silver. The ones stolen were on loan from the National History Museum of Romania, one of 15 contributing Romanian museums to the show. Immediate concerns about the pieces were summarized by Aaron L. Thompson, a professor of art crime at John Jay College, who wrote in an email shortly after the robbery, quote, thieves who target displays of artifacts made from precious metal are after the precious metal, not the artifacts. Sadly, I have little doubt that these pieces have already been melted down, end quote. From the beginning, police suspected multiple co-conspirators and got Interpol in on this. On January 29th, they were able to arrest 3 individuals for for their suspected involvement. The arrests were made after searches of the three's residences in Heerhugowaard, a city in North Holland approximately 180 kilometers or 112 miles from Assen. The suspects were detained based on detective research, camera photos, and tips from the public, but the objects have not yet been found, so police are not ruling out yet more arrests. In fact, they posted online a photo of another suspect they are currently searching for. For its part, Gogh Museum said, quote, "We are very pleased with the hopeful news regarding the arrests in North Holland. The safe return of the stolen artifacts would be a fantastic step for all involved," end quote. The last week saw several headlines describing how Trump's impacts are already being felt. Museums especially are still scrambling to grasp the impacts of his DEI mandate. And to that end, a major development, the Smithsonian Institution has set to shutter its diversity offices. The headline broke just days after DC's National Gallery of Art said that it would cancel its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs coming on January 28th. The Smithsonian Secretary, Lonnie G. Bunch III, said that the closure of the institution's office is a so-called first step to respond to the new federal mandate in a staff-wide email. Our sources note that within the week, the Smithsonian closed its diversity office and removed references to DEI initiatives or even entire web pages themselves across its website in response to Trump's controversial executive order. But the Smithsonian claims it will maintain its focus on visitor accessibility, which it deems essential. According to the New York Times, the Smithsonian will also freeze hiring for all federal positions. Existing employees will have to return full-time to in-person work as well. Ambiguous responses and messy restructuring from institutions across the country indicate widespread uncertainty, particularly in the arts scene, as organizations either try to roll back their initiatives or determine whether their programs are already in compliance. Many are concerned about unanswered questions surrounding how the administration's anti-DEI stance could affect museums that only receive small amounts of federal funding, or how they could impact privately funded nonprofit museums. Support for such institutions was already precarious under Trump's since-rescinded Office of Management and Budget memorandum to temporarily freeze, quote, all federal financial assistance, end quote. Many see the National Gallery and the Smithsonian's changes as previews of the impact of Trump's policies on the culture sector. Spokespersons for both the Museum of Fine Arts Boston and the North Carolina Museum of Art, home of the state's art collection, told Hyperallergic that the institutions, quote, cannot speculate at this time, end quote, about the EO's applicability in the latter case, while the state's government reviews the president's new mandates. So some are apparently keeping their heads down, while others, on the other hand, including the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit, the Getty, and the High Museum, have said they have no plans to make any changes to their DEI commitments, programs, or staffing. What's next, honeys, is to be determined, but we cannot lose hope yet. As Renika Moore, director of the American Civil Liberty Union's Racial Justice Program, recently pointed out, Trump's executive order attempts to, quote, bully institutions into abandoning critical programs, end quote, may yet fall through. This is because, quote, no court has declared DEIA efforts inherently illegal, and President Trump cannot override decades of legal precedent, end quote. Or at least we sincerely hope he will not try. Another major headline from last week, Rhode Island's School of Design has voted against Israel divestment. It was announced last week that the school's Board of Trustees voted against a proposal to divest from Israel presented by the school's Students for Justice in Palestine chapter, or RSJP. The divestment proposal reads in part, quote, the reason why we create art and seek to understand it in a thoughtful and complex way is because we collectively believe that it holds a real bearing on global society. If we as an institution do not put into practice our ability to affect influence as global changemakers, we render hollow RISD's fundamental value of the power of art and design and the power of an art institution to do good in the world, end quote. The school's endowment total stood at $396 million US as of June 2023, though a spokesperson for the school declined to disclose what percentage exactly is invested in companies linked to Israeli interests. In a statement emailed to the RISD community members and posted on the art school's website, the Board of Trustees said RSJP's trustees' proposal did not meet the criteria outlined in its statement on divestment adopted in May of 2015. The statement confirms the school's duty is to invest in order to, quote, achieve the maximum possible return, end quote, on interest, of course, but that, quote, in rare circumstances, the Board of Trustees may also, in its sole discretion, take political and social considerations into account, end quote. So there was grounds to do it, but the board rejected it, and this is and is not surprising. The board had reacted unfavorably to the group's 3-day occupation of a campus building last May as part of a larger movement across U.S. academic institutions to divest from Israel. And in an Instagram post this week, RSJP alleged that the administration did not engage with them in good faith, not really recognizing that in fall of 2023, 40% of current students signed a petition in favor of disclosure and divestment. RSJP also claimed that several trustees did not attend on short notice and told Hyperallergic that as long as the administration refuses to divest, RSJP will not rest either. Last week also saw outrage over claims of queer erasure in a Smithsonian show featuring Felix Gonzalez-Torres. Controversy was raised by scholar Ignacio Darnaud around the presentation of the famed artwork Untitled, Portrait of Ross in L.A., 1991. Earlier in the week, Darnaud published an op-ed with the publication Out, accusing the National Portrait Gallery of queer erasure because the individually and brightly wrapped candy pieces that this work is made out of has been placed in a straight line rather than put into a pile as the installation is typically shown. This was confirmed by a picture Darnaud posted to Instagram. The wall text for the work explains the ideal weight factor of the typically piled candy, but does not mention the commonly held interpretations made even during the artist's lifetime that the pile's weight matches that of Ross Laycock, Gonzalez-Torres' partner who died of AIDS-related causes, nor other readings, really, of the artwork. Rock Hushka, a co-curator for the exhibit Art AIDS America at the Bronx Museum, called the Art Institute's omission a, quote, egregious error, end quote, in light of the move by some to appreciate Gonzalez-Torres' work only on an aesthetic level and erase its political contexts in recent years. Though the story seems pretty obvious, we found a twist here, honeys. The presenters of the exhibition, the Felix Gonzalez-Torres Foundation, publicly rebutted Darnaud's essay at length on Wednesday, saying that the controversy that resulted from the Out article had been the result of misinformation. The foundation noted the high, intense level of research done by the curators of the show and how much they made it a point to incorporate significant queer content throughout the exhibition, especially direct references to Gonzalez-Torres' queer identity, his partner Ross Laycock, and both of their deaths from complications related to AIDS. They argue that they have provided, quote, a generous forum for a vast and diverse audience to engage with this content, other political content, and Gonzalez-Torres' works. End quote. Other critics of Darnaud's essay noted that other texts in the show mention AIDS and Laycock by name. As you can imagine, honeys, we care about this headline because misinformation also matters and also happens in the arts. Yet so does erasure, and it does seem to plague the artist. There was some scandal back in 2022 when the artwork was exhibited by its current owner, the Art Institute of Chicago, which altered its wall text for the work after a similar outcry. A similar thing happened in 2016 when a 2-page press release for an exhibition at the David Zwirner Gallery in New York, which now co-represents Gonzalez-Torres' estate, made no mention of HIV at all. Though we are appreciative of the care of Gonzalez-Torres' legacy and his context, it appears this is a situation where there was perhaps too much reactivity. The last week also saw the Montgomery mayor call for the removal of a, quote, politicized, end quote, billboard artwork. The piece in question was designed by the art collective For Freedoms. It reproduces civil rights photographer Spider Martin's iconic 1965 image, 2-Minute Warning. The photo, taken during Selma's infamous Bloody Sunday, is overlaid with Trump's campaign slogan. For Freedoms was founded by artists Eric Gottsman, Hank Willis Thomas, and Michelle Wu in 2016, and the organization has installed over 500 billboards since its launch. The photo on this particular billboard was taken just before the police mob attacked hundreds of marchers advocating for voting rights while crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. The group first debuted its Martin billboard in 2016 in Pearl, Mississippi, also prompting removal calls from the town's Republican mayor and then governor, Phil Bryant, who called it racist, according to the collective's 2024 monograph. Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed has requested the removal of the temporary public art installation, which was funded and contracted by the city, earlier this week after it captured the attention of the conservative Alabama media outlet 1819 News. Reed himself is a Democrat who became Montgomery's first Black mayor in 2019. In his request for its removal, he wrote, quote, "We must be extremely mindful of how we use such images of our shared history, especially when they risk being perceived as politically charged. Our history deserves to be treated with the utmost respect and care, ensuring it unites rather than divides us as a community," end quote. Tracy Martin, the daughter of Spider Martin, who passed away in 2003, told Hyperallergic that Reed's directive was, quote, "a violation of freedom of speech," end quote. The mayor went on to confirm that the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts has purchased the billboard. Another who passed last week was artist Jeanne Quick-to-See Smith. She died on January 24th at 85, and her death was confirmed by her New York-based representative, Garth Greenan Gallery. Art News describes her as, quote, "a painter who revolutionized the landscape genre and paved a path to success for generations of Native American artists that followed," end quote. And finally, Alonzo Davis, the artist who founded one of America's first Black-owned galleries, died on January 27th at 82 years old. News of his passing was confirmed by his representative, Los Angeles Gallery, Parash Heinen. And our final headline for the day last week saw Amsterdam's Van Gogh Museum deny attribution for a portrait bought at a garage sale. The organization officially determined that a long-lost portrait titled Elamar from 1889, which depicts a fisherman with a round hat on his head and a pipe in his mouth, was not, in fact, by Vincent van Gogh. The decision contradicts a 458-page report claiming it was by the famed painter, produced by the New York-based firm LMI Group International. They had acquired the work for an undisclosed amount in 2019 from an anonymous antiques collector who found it at a Minnesota garage sale. The company was understandably not very happy. They had put more than $30,000 into investigating the work, which it said would have been created while Van Gogh was at the St. Paul Psychiatric Sanitarium in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, France. Van Gogh had been at the sanatorium of his own will between Mays of 1889 and 1890. The firm went on to question the museum's methods, claiming it was, quote, "puzzled why the Van Gogh Museum invested less than one working day to summarily reject the facts presented without offering any explanation, let alone studying the painting directly rather than looking at it reproduced as a JPEG," end quote. The answer may simply be that the Van Gogh Museum is known for its rigorous authentication process, which most of the time results in the outright rejection of many requests to even take a look at it. In the past, the museum has considered up to 200 authentication requests per year, but in the past few years, requests have increased to roughly 500 per year, sparking changes to the museum's approval process. It will now only consider submissions that have had additional approval from galleries, auction houses, or art professionals, which drops the total amount down to around 40 candidates per year. It remains to be seen what LMI Group does with this artwork next. And that is our episode for the week, honeys. I hope you enjoyed the Beesness. As always, take care, hydrate or dehydrate, stay safe, all that good stuff, and I'll talk to you soon. This podcast is produced, created, hosted, formerly edited, and fact-checked by master's degree holder Celia Bugno. Chris Meinhold is responsible for our editing, mixing, and our intro and outro music. Special thanks to him for that. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, share, comment, so on all your favorite listening as well as social media channels.